So the first podcast I did was with Chris Smith.
Yeah.
And we actually couldn't do it with the headphones on because we both struggled so much with hearing our own voices for the first time. And and like gradually I've adjusted to it, and now I just force everybody to
be able to just get on with it.
And it's, I don't know, it's kind of, it's a bit freaky, isn't it, when you first do it?
Yeah. Nobody likes hearing the sound of their own voice, do they?
No, I've definitely had to get used to it, but yeah, no, nobody likes that. So Gareth from Pedal a Bike Away. Well, actually, I shouldn't say you're from Pedal a Bike Away because you also got a shop in Monmouth as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we have a shop down there called Pedal Syndicate, and we have that, and the business or trailhead up here as well called Pedal a Bike Away, and a coaching company called YMTB as well. So fingers in a lot of pies.
Yeah, there's a lot going on here. And I mean, we're only here on a Friday and it's like midwinter and still there's plenty of people floating around. It's a popular spot, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the forest is very easy to be able to reach from a lot of places. And I think that's one of the reasons that it is so popular as a riding destination. And obviously we've got a really nice mix of trails here as well. So kind of attracts it. But we have seen an increasing trend. Friday seems to be the new weekend. And people seem to have a little bit more flexibility post-COVID to be able to ride their bikes. So fortunately for us, that means a little bit more traffic midweek, even in winter.
Yeah, it's interesting you immediately touched on the subject of traffic. So let's get straight onto the e-bike topic. Now, a lot of people say, particularly those that don't ride e-bikes, that e-bikes actually lead to an increased wear on the trails and maybe have a negative effect in the long run. What has been your experience here at the Forest of Dean?
Well, firstly, we've seen, obviously, like everywhere, a massive increase in e-bike numbers. And I think now we're seeing anecdotally over 50% of the visitors turning up on e-bikes.
50%?
Over 50%.
Wow.
On the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, the mix of bikes outside the centre is pretty much equal between e-bikes and non-e-bikes now. So it is a massive, massive growth, or has been a massive growth over the last couple of years. And yeah, people are obviously going to be able to have the ability to be able to ride more trails. And, that's one of the advantages of an e-bike. So yeah, they're going to have more of an impact on the trails. But the demographic we're seeing tends to be a little bit of an older user on average, and still kind of going out there and doing kind of those bigger loops. So not necessarily covering each trail more than one time, but maybe being able to get more trails done in their riding time. Or obviously a lot of us these days are very time limited, so e-bikes are fantastic for that. So actually you're just able to be able to get your classic 3-hour loop done probably in an hour and a half and spend more time with the kids and the family on the weekend.
People, I think, get too focused on the weight of the bike. And do you think that perhaps the style of how you might ride, or maybe your skill level of riding also has an added effect on the wear and tear of the trail?
I think the second point there, the skill level is probably the bigger one. The weight of the e-bike per se, I mean, we've all had heavy downhill bikes in the past. I don't think the weight is as big of an issue, but I think, the skill level probably is. And, riding a full fat e-bike, for example, you do have to reset your riding a little bit in terms of thinking about when you brake in and how early you're braking in potentially, because you've got that little bit more momentum behind you. So it is, resetting your riding, and a lot of people buying e-bikes potentially for the first time, perhaps don't have the skill level of a rider who's perhaps come over to an e-bike after riding for several years.
Do you find that there's less experienced mountain bikers out on the trails now because of e-bikes?
I think either you can say, people who've been brought into the sport because of e-bikes, which I think is fantastic, but also obviously people who've come back to it as well, because, we, particularly in COVID down at the bike shop, saw loads of people who would ride motocross and said, oh, I can't be doing this, can't get anywhere, I need an e-bike, I want to be able to ride kind of locally. So you saw kind of people adopting it from that perspective as well. Obviously they tend to be fairly well skilled, because you've got to have a high skill level to muscle a big motocross bike around on the trails. You also seen a very new user coming into it, and a lot of those people don't potentially have the skills and sometimes the trail etiquette, which I'm sure is another thing we'll come on to, but have the trail etiquette that people who have been established in the sport over a period of time will have kind of naturally picked up.
I know that this subject comes up on pretty much every podcast, but the attitudes towards e-bikers. Do you think that's something that is changing? And is the attitude with e-bikers, is it starting to shift in the opposite direction? So as you say, people who have come into the sport like straight into the world of e-bikes and skipped that whole mountain bike thing in the first place, do they perhaps not understand quite the trail etiquette that exists out there?
I think it's yeah, that certainly is something that we've experienced at the trail centre, where you've had people who just perhaps will ride around in groups with their mates, don't really have any kind of awareness of the other trail users, and that's not out of anything saying that actually they're doing it out of spite or malice or anything. It's just that actually a lot of these people are new to the sport, and I suppose part of our job as being the trail centre is to help with that education process, and actually or as rollers, mountain bikers that have been in the sport is kind of help that education process, so that a lot of us would have come from a sport from over a period of time, and actually you'd have had someone you more experienced that you ride with who kind of gives you a few hints and tips. But if you're new to the sport and you just bought an e-bike for yourself, you perhaps don't have that support network around you. So actually those kind of things are actually really, really key in terms of being able to help everyone be able to enjoy and access the trails.
Yeah, it's funny. My attitude to riding and also my knowledge of riding is still growing now. And I mean, I've been riding bikes since I was a kid, and even still, I learn from the people around me. And particularly doing this podcast is fascinating to get the views and opinions of other people who are more knowledgeable than me. Like you say, perhaps there's a lot of people that think, do you know what, I'm just going to go out and buy an e-bike, and they haven't got that background.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what we want to see, isn't it? You want to kind of widen the appeal of the sport that we love. And if it's another barrier removed to people being able to get out there and enjoy the outdoors, that's only a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's just about how we can support that process and help educate people. And like I said, at the end of the day, a lot of it is just people just not understanding or not having the skill set. So, how do we overcome some of those barriers? How do we actually get these people into perhaps some coaching or again, perhaps give them some support or advice to be able to develop and get a greater understanding of what their riding style is having in terms of impact on the trails.
So we're in the middle of a pretty gloomy, wet winter at the moment. Going back to the trails and the impact of bikes on the trails, how much work do you guys have to put into maintaining the trails here at Forest of Dean?
So in terms of the maintenance, it's done through a organisation called the Dean Trail Volunteers, and they do digs every Wednesday and every Saturday and put a huge volume of work and real labour of love into the trail network. And then you've got obviously Forestry England obviously as well, who have the responsibility for the kind of, I suppose, what you'd call the surface trails. So the Verteras, the Family Cycle Trail here, or the Colliers Trail as it's now known, their responsibility is for those kind of manufactured trails. And then obviously the Dean Trail Volunteers look after all the downhill lines, the free miners trails, and maintain and look after those. But it is a huge labour of love, and we're very lucky to be able to have such a kind of well-established organisation here that who again have evolved over the last 20 years and actually put a huge amount of effort into maintaining and developing those tracks for everyone to enjoy.
Because of health and safety and perhaps, I don't know, the suing sort of environment that we live in these days, are you limited to the type of trails that you can actually create here and also the type of features that you can add to the trails?
Not so much. I mean, if you speak to kind of Forestry England, we've got a very active now cycle ranger team here, headed up by Steve, and actually they are very progressive. And if you look at the new GBU jump line, for example, it's got some gaps and sizable features in there that really push your kind of riding style. So there's not really direct limitations from that perspective, but obviously from a liability perspective, Forestry England are very hot on that side of it in terms of, you want very well built and constructed things that are going to last, not kind of a wooden pallet with a little bit of mud kicked over the top of it and call it a jump, because that's great for perhaps you and your mates messing around in the woods, but it's just not going to last as a feature for people to be able to enjoy, and ultimately will become dangerous and unsustainable.
Yeah, and I think it's when you compare a proper trail like what you get here to sort of home built things that we often see, sort of off piste stuff in the woods. Sustainability of the trail is definitely a very important factor, because you see those trails in the woods that they look great for about a year, and then all of a sudden they start to look a bit ropey, and then I wouldn't touch that.
And that's exactly the same. In the forest here, there's obviously a far wider trail network that's out there, and that's part of the attraction for people to come and to ride in the Forest of Dean. But I think there is an established team of trail builders out there as well that work on that wider trail network. And I think a lot of that is they again learnt and understanding that actually building features doesn't necessarily always last, and actually probably attracts attention in terms of getting the trail knocked down or closed or whatever. But actually, a lot of the more flowy stuff is always then left in situ. So we're very lucky and blessed here that there's a massive network of off-piste trails. They're really, really good fun to ride and easy to be able to access as well. And that in some sense does take the pressure off the trail centre as well. Which is great, because obviously again if everyone was just riding the same trails all the time, you get more wear and tear. So there is that kind of added benefit as well that you spread the load, I suppose, over a wider trail network, and actually you're going to have a lower impact.
What kind of community events sort of happen here as well? Do you have a regular riding group that comes, or do you have sort of weekends where specific things occur?
Yeah, so we've actually taken a very different tack with it, in that the weekends here, obviously, because we are so easy to be able to access, you get a lot of people travelling, particularly from down the M4 corridor, to be able to access the Forest of Dean and potentially, say, Cumcarna, probably two of the easiest places to be able to get to in terms of access off the motorway network. So on the weekend, we tend to find it's very actually already visitor focused in terms of people travelling to the area. So we've put like events on, a part of our kind of ethos is very much, when we're doing some of these events, has been trying to put things on midweek. So for example, we're open late night on Thursday every week, which is very much aimed at kind of like the local riding network. But we also do our series in the summer called FOD Thursdays. It's like a timed run series, so it's not a race, but you can come and ride on a taped track and actually get a time, and then ride back up the hill, and then be able to get another time and see how you can improve over the evening, which obviously really helps in terms of improving your own riding. And actually, we've seen it becoming increasingly popular with e-bikes, because obviously, again, you could come up and get 8-10 runs done in the evening and really see that progression in terms of your riding, versus obviously when you're on your analog bike, as it were, you might only get 4 or 5 runs, and then you're like, I'm done.
Yeah, that's very true. It's funny, as you were speaking, I was thinking back to the first time that I rode at a trail centre, and that was at Coy de Brennan, probably nearly 20 years ago. And I remember being quite intimidated and going to a place that was specifically designed for mountain bikers, and thinking there's going to be lots of other really good riders there, and maybe I'm a bit out of my depth. How do you go about trying to encourage people that are maybe less experienced to come and ride here?
Yeah, I think that's one of, again, the real attractions with the Forest of Dean, is that you've got the family cycle trail, which is obviously a green level trail. So you just go out and you explore the forest, and it's a beautiful cycle round, but you don't need any real skill level. And then you kind of progress onto the Verdurous Trail, which is the blue mountain bike trail here. It's all surfaced. There's nothing that's going to catch you out. It's great to be able to ride around on the hardtail. And then obviously you kind of got the red trail, and then the downhill lines and enduro lines. So actually, you've got a lot of progression in one riding spot, and that was one of the attractions for Ian and I when we bought this business back in 2011. Was very much, we could see this potential to be able to be almost like a little bit of a one-stop shop, because you can go from families and young kids all the way through to quite advanced riding, and actually all be able to do it within a stone's throw of the centre, and that's really been part of the kind of I suppose the appeal and the growth of the FOD, as it's affectionately known. It's
quite unique in the fact that all the riding seems to be quite condensed, and a lot of the good riding is quite condensed into just sort of a fairly close area, and so it's great for those people who do perhaps ride with families and want to come back, and perhaps half the session you go out with your kid, and then the other half you go out and shred the trails. That seems to be definitely an advantage to this place.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly what I did when my kids were a little bit younger. Was exactly that. We'd come here, and they'd actually we'd go out, perhaps burn off a little bit of energy. Maybe take them up to Beechinhurst, which is just across the road, which has got a lovely play area, and then kind of go out and smash some laps out. Once the kids had already been kind of worn out. And it was one of the other reasons, one of the other things that we'd done here when we started back in the kind of like really, I think it was 2013, we launched what we called our Little Fodders Kids Mountain Bike Club. And part of that was actually going through that experience as a parent yourself and going, well, actually, there's two things that I really want. One, I want to get my kids hooked on mountain biking, and secondly, I want some free time to be able to ride my bike. Yeah. So be able to drop your kid off for a couple of hours on a Saturday morning and be able to go, oh, wicked, I can go and get some laps in now. Awesome. And again, actually, we've seen a lot of the parents actually on e-bikes because I got an hour and a half. Fantastic. I can go and blitz a really good ride in an hour and a half on a EMTB, whereas you probably wouldn't get the same kind of amount of riding done on a landlog bike. But also like seeing the kids really get into it as well.
Yeah.
And the growth of, should we say, tow ropes. Attach the kid onto the back of the bike, tow them up to the top of the hill, let them drop into a track, and then go back and get some multiple laps in. So yeah.
Do you know, I keep seeing like teenagers out, like one of them might have an e-bike, and literally kids on tow ropes behind, like just hanging on for dear life, trying to get up the hill. It's like people are saying that the reliability of e-bikes is an issue, but I think if they can deal with that, they can always deal with anything.
Well, that's very much it. And I think, maybe as the weight kind of like increases, probably not such a good idea, is it? But actually, when the kids are 4, 5, 6, I think it's fantastic, isn't it? Get one of those tow ropes, tow your son or daughter up the hill. They then can actually still really enjoy the mountain biking, but without what is, let's be fair, the onerous part, which is really putting the effort up. Even here, where it's only like a 15-minute climb to the top of the hill. As a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, that's a big effort. You're probably only going to do it once. Yeah. And actually, again, then if you can get them up there 3, 4 times, drop into count down the super flowy trail and go, oh, look, they're just going to have a big smile on their face and really going to go, this is amazing. And that's essentially what you want, isn't it? You want to see kids having a great time. And if e-bikes allow us to be able to open that up a little bit more, then hey, that's again only a good thing.
You mentioned that you've obviously got your shop in Monmouth, as well as there's the shop here as well. How have you found the industry at the moment? Because I know a lot of people are going through fairly tough times currently.
Yeah, I think that the last month or so, we've seen some real green shoots come through. So January, actually, you weren't expecting January to be a good month, but actually, we did see that trade really start to pick up in January. But if you'd asked me the same question in December, I would have said that it was had been a really challenging kind of like 9 months for the industry, probably a year for the industry. There's massive kind of oversupply of bikes. There's huge amounts of online kind of discounting, and that's just created. It's been, in all fairness, a real challenge to be able to keep the lights on. But we're very lucky here because we've got such a good, strong local riding community that actually, you have managed to be able to keep the lights on. And hopefully now we've kind of turned that corner and we're moving into a new year. Hopefully we're coming out of the credit crunch a little bit, and we'll see the bike industry return to some resemblance of normal. There's still overstock out there at the moment. Quite clearly, you can just go online and you'll just see the number of sales offers that you've got. But a lot of the model manufacturers for 24, you're starting to see far more sensible bike numbers come through. And I think that's then going to kind of almost rebalance it a little bit, and hopefully we'll see things return to normal, where we will actually be able to kind of afford to be able to pay the staff, keep the lights on, and look after the teams. And at the end of the day, that's what everyone talks about, and they want to see and support the local bike shop. But often, actually, when it comes down to it, obviously all of our own pockets, they've been hit as well. We're all paying more bills, and you completely understand that actually then people are going, well, that I can get it cheaper elsewhere. I might have to do that, and sometimes you just can't match that as a local shop. You're looking at it and go, Santa Cruz 40 to 50% off a bike. It's like, who could afford to do that? It's
buy
mad.
one get one free on some brands.
It essentially is, isn't it?
Yeah.
You looked at it and go, wow. I mean, yeah, it works if you've got that vertical integration as a company, where perhaps you own the bike shop, you own the bike brand, you own the distributor, you can afford to give these big discounts. But actually, if you're a local independent, you don't get those kind of margins. You just can't compete with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. How big a threat would you say are those direct sales models to your local bike shop?
Let's be fair, the direct sales models have been around for a long period of time, and actually you're still seeing the success of the local bike shops as well. You're probably not anywhere near as many local bike shops as we had like 15, 20 years ago, but the good ones will always kind of like, find a way through and innovate and be able to change a little bit to be able to adapt to the market. And I think a lot of the brands out there, still recognize that they need to have bricks and mortar stores supporting their brands. And the part of that is actually through the warranty and the servicing element of it. And you've got different ways, obviously, to skin a cat. But you see some of the direct brands that are opening up again service hubs or centres to be able to do that, and others that are going through their local bike shops. So I think there will definitely be that continued evolution. But if you bought a bike, you don't want to have to travel 2 to 3 hours if something goes wrong to be able to get it sorted out. You want that to be on your doorstep. So I think that is the challenge for the direct sales brands, is going, well, how do I make this really nice and easy and convenient for the consumer, and how does that local bike shop kind of fit into that model? And I certainly think there's definitely a place for the bricks and mortar store, because you do want that kind of support, expertise, service, knowledge, servicing, and obviously warranty support that you may not be able to provide if you're buying a bike direct from Europe somewhere and it's getting shipped to you in a box. That's going to be a real challenge. And if you're without your bike for 6 months, we all want to get out. The reason we have the bikes is because we want to get out there and ride.
Do you think the more sort of fragile nature of some aspects of e-bikes is perhaps a benefit, a net benefit to bike shops, because people are slightly more concerned about spending a lot of money on an e-bike when they're buying direct from a manufacturer, or if they're buying secondhand, as opposed to buying from a bike shop where they've got that comeback if something does go wrong?
Yeah, and I think that's certainly, I can only talk really from a personal perspective as well. And that's certainly what I would do, because you do want that warranty support, and you do want that backup, and you do want that peace of mind. And let's be fair, e-bikes have come down massively in price, but they're still not cheap. So it is always going to be a big outlay in terms of your cash. And actually, there is always going to be those concerns there in terms of, what happens when something goes wrong, and you do want that peace of mind. And we still see that, we've seen obviously a massive trend towards e-bikes in terms of sales through the shop. It's well over 70% of new bike sales now. Wow. Analog bike sales are still there, but generally are at lower price points. So, if you're coming in, you've got $2 to $3 grand to spend, you want your entry level full sus bike, or, a really good quality hardtail. But as soon as you're starting to get up to the $4 to $5 grand market, the consumer's got choice then. And at that point, obviously, most people are going towards the e-bike. And that's where we're seeing that kind of growth. And obviously the technology is advancing at such a fast rate as well, isn't it? Oh, it's fantastic. I'm lucky enough just to get one of those new white e-lights, yes. And oh my God, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And I was like, wow, this is like where my full fat e-bike was only a few years ago. Yeah. And now it weighs less than 20 kilos, rides like my analog bike. It's got an amazing range. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I've been riding the latest Levo SL, which I continually talk about, and it's incredible, really. The progress in lightweight e-bikes is really, to me, it's the biggest step forward that the industry has taken recently.
Yeah, and I think for those of us that perhaps ride both, where you've ridden a analog bike and an e-bike, actually the closer the ride experience is, the less that you do have to think about resetting your ride in terms of your braking points, the weight of the bike, what it's going to do and how it's going to react down the trail. So for me, that's always been a massive thing, and it's one of the reasons that I'm kind of a massive e-bike, e-light, I suppose, advocate, or lightweight e-bike advocate. For me, I want to be able to ride both, and when I've got a little bit more time on my hands, I will still ride my analog bike. The uplift days, still going to ride the analog bike, but actually, increasingly the e-light or the lightweight e-bike is the one that I'm going to go to first in the shed. And actually, I can only see that continuing to happen and evolve for the the average UK trail rider.
White's a cool brand. I like White because I see it in a similar vein to orange bikes, I guess. But White does seem to have developed, and they've really embraced the new technologies. And I love the fact that they often come with Hope kit as well from Standard. Like, they're great, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm lucky working within the trade. I've managed to be able to get one of the new Works bikes, and like I said, it's dripping in flipping Hope kit, and the new brakes, and I've got some Burtec bars on it and stuff, and it is, it's just a dream machine. And White have always been known for their ride quality, but as I said actually in one of my latest kind of newsletters that we do for the shop, and it's like probably a brand historically that you would have bought with the head rather than the heart, because they weren't aesthetically the best looking bikes, but they always rode really well and they were great value for money. And now actually you look at them and you're like, wow, actually this is a bike now I buy with both my head and my heart. And obviously the new Bosch lightweight motor system is phenomenal. You knew that when Bosch brought something to the market, it was going to be good. It's that continued evolution, and I think I'm super excited to see how that continues to evolve. And I think we're going to get closer and closer to enduro bike weight with actually good range on the bikes, and then bigger choice for the consumer, where they're able to go, what do I want my e-bike to look like? Is it going to be more like an enduro bike, a standard analog enduro bike, lightweight, or actually do I want to have monster range on it, and I want to be able to ride all day, and I'm happy for the extra weight on the bike. It's going to just give us all the increasing amounts of choice, and I don't see that as a bad thing at all.
My experience so far in lightweight e-bikes is that this sort of terrain here that you've got Forest of Dean is almost the perfect environment for them. It's that you don't get super steep climbs, and the descents are just like ideal for a lightweight e-bike.
Yeah, I think, the stuff you try and find in the forest is sometimes where I found a bit of a challenge, if I'm honest, with a full fat e-bike, as I'll call it, is that on tighter, twistier trails, particularly in the winter when it's wet, they'd carry momentum sometimes in the wrong places, and then actually become a bit of a handful. And actually a lot of the female bike riders, and we've got like a big female riding community here in the Forest of Dean, they really struggled with the weight. And actually the lightweight e-bike, again, I know was kind of like revolutionized that a little bit, because actually suddenly there's a bike that they don't have to muscle around too much, that is easy enough to be able to pick up. And again, he said, you're getting closer to that analog feel. And that was like, again, massive kind of, I suppose, turning point to actually introduce e-bikes to a wider community. Smaller rider, the lighter rider actually benefits a lot more from that kind of lightweight e-bike, whereas obviously a bigger, heavier rider potentially can muscle around a full fat e-bike and actually be able to control it really well. But there's nothing that knocks your confidence more than actually a bike trying to get away from you. And actually that's again where these lightweight e-bikes really start to kind of fill a gap. Really, is that they don't try to gallop away with you, which can be a good thing. Big open fast downhill. Brilliant, it's carrying momentum really, really well. But tighter, twistier, perhaps steeper one where you're trying to control your pace, maybe became a bit of a handful.
You mentioned about demographics earlier. Have you noticed a shift in the type of people who come to ride here and perhaps who spend their money in the shop?
I think that it's something that we really try to work on really hard when we first took over, is that we wanted it to be a far more inclusive place, because initially you perhaps might go to a trail centre, or you might go to a bike park in particular, and it's a lot of guys, full face helmets, body armour. It's quite intimidating, Yeah. And I think, again, that was us for one of the real appeals here. We've got a real mix, because obviously said we've got the family cycle trail and the blue mountain bike trail. That's kind of very introductory. You might get a very strong family audience for both of those trails actually, and that immediately obviously brings a different demographic to the cycle centre than potentially other riding destinations. And we'd done a lot of things where we've got the Dames riding group, which is a female riding group, a women's riding group here in the Forest of Dean. We wanted to kind of like support as much as possible those kind of initiatives, hold women only events, and obviously there's some great, as I kind of touched on before, some great coaching companies that operate from the site that again has meant that it becomes a far more inclusive environment. And we see we're up over 30% of riders here are women, so that's really, really positive. And I know some bike parks probably struggle down at the 2 to 3% kind of marker. So it's certainly something that we've been really, really, really keen to push and encourage.
Do you think the one thing that e-bikes have managed to do, which perhaps mountain bikes struggle to do, was to bring people or a different type of person to mountain biking? So like you say, the female rider, perhaps the older rider, some people who just don't have the time to put the hard graft in to be able to ride up a hill and really enjoy a long trail ride, perhaps. Is that something that e-bikes have opened up to more people?
Yeah, no, it certainly is. And I mean, I can use a personal example. My dad now is into his, he's going to turn 80 this year, still riding an e-mountain bike, and he wasn't, I bought him an e-mountain bike about 5 years ago. He was at the level where his rides were, he's only managing about an hour's ride. He was really struggling with the hills. So, he was able to extend his riding career, shall we say, by having an e-mountain bike. So that's kind of like the one end of the spectrum. But as we said, obviously, for people who are very time limited, they're a fantastic tool. So that's brought people into it as well. The fact that actually, you potentially, it opens up that you can ride from the door, because again, you've got that opportunity. You don't mind if there's a little bit of transition before you get to the trails. That again opens up some riding opportunities for you, and explore from your door, which is something obviously which was massive through COVID, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I can only ride from my doorstep. Actually, it's 5 miles, and then it's quite hilly to be able to get to my first trail. Again, if you've got an e-mountain bike, that suddenly really opens up the doors for you, because you cover it really, really quickly. And like you said, it brings in then, I've said, different people who, a lot of what we found was people who said, I was riding a mountain bike, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And actually now, they're like, I want to get back into it. Yeah. And that's often been a barrier in the past. You think, I don't have the fitness, I don't have the, perhaps, to be able to come into it, on an analog bike, it's going to be a lot of hard work. Perhaps don't have the time to be able to commit to that. Whereas actually the e-mountain bike has gone, wow, actually this is a load of fun. And then actually the knock-on effect of that is they're suddenly getting fitter alongside it. Yeah. Potentially losing weight, improving basically their all-round health. And as I said, enjoying the outdoors. And at the end of the day, that's one of the key things, isn't it? We want to be out there, and I think nature is a fantastic place to be able to reset your mind, if nothing else. So actually, there's just huge amounts of benefits to it. So it's been great to be able to see that kind of growth and bringing new people into the sport.
Here's a question for you. How often do you personally choose to ride a mountain bike instead of the e-bike?
It's actually this week. My shop manager here, Joe, and we're going to go out and do Enduro 2 again this year, out in Maribel. So this Monday we're earmarking Mondays as an analog bike day. Yeah. So, but it's always been that little bit of a have to kind of commit to, because otherwise it's just so much fun to be able to kind of jump on, get the laps in, and actually for me as well is I said, I'm probably one of those really time limited individuals. I've got 2 kids, a dog, my partner, etc. So you're kind of quite kind of full on work. So often, you're not having that time to be able to ride the bike. Whereas the e-bike for me was just a game changer, because a lot of my riding now actually is between Monmouth, where I live, and the Forest of Dean. It's 10 miles. It's all off road. E-mountain bikes allow me to be able to do that as a commute, ride some great single track on the way into work, ride some great single track on the way home. And then actually it's not eating into my kind of into my family time at all, or the kids' activities, or your other commitments outside of work. So for me, it's been a real game changer from that perspective.
Now, the other element of e-bikes that I didn't quite realize until I really started getting into riding them frequently was how much you can enjoy a climb on an e-bike. And particularly the technical climbs, the challenge of that becomes like a whole new sport altogether. So are you adapting the trails here at all to allow for that, or are there any plans in the future to incorporate more technical climbs?
Yeah, that's certainly something that's been looked at, and it's been muted a lot of times actually, in terms of introducing some more technical climbs. What it does obviously do is it opens up different ways to the top, because obviously you can go with a far more perhaps direct style to the top of the trails. Climbs that would have been quite laborious, or potentially even a push before, suddenly are opened up into being able to be able to ride up it quite easily. There's a climb here that access some of the trails over on the far side of the compound, the cycle compound here, and it is a very steep climb. Jumping on the e-bike, you can whiz up it and then drop into those trails. So Y2K, Elephant Man, that side of the hill, the enduro tracks, and it's actually said it's not too onerous. Whereas you probably have avoided it on the analog bike, you'd have gone, nah, not happening. But yeah, certainly it's something that we're looking at now moving forward. Is whereas actually, you want to build some more technical climbs in. I think the challenge you've got, we're working, as said, with organisations like the Dean Trail Volunteers, like the Forestry England, is you pay the per metre of trail if they're building a kind of like a constructed trail, sure. And obviously where you're going to get most bang for your buck is generally going to be into a track that goes downhill because more people will enjoy that. So actually, it is. I can understand you've got a finite resource in terms of both man hours and obviously in terms of financial resources. So I think it's something that's on the radar that will happen in future. But obviously, at the end of the day, it's going to take a little bit of time to get there just because of those challenges in terms of, both labour hours and obviously the financial cost of creating bespoke climbs.
In terms of cost, when building trails, are you better off focusing on perhaps modifying the existing trails and adding B lines? Is that an approach you're taking, or is it more a focus of let's just have more trails on the hill?
I think if you ask that question to Forestry England as the land manager, they would say that they don't want more trails on the hill as a general rule, because obviously there's more liability, more inspections to be carried out, etc. So they'd prefer to see kind of the efforts put into maintaining the existing trail network, or modifying or adapting the existing trail network to be able to meet the demands of the current riders. So one of the things that's currently being looked at is a ski run here is the original downhill track on the hill, and there's plans in place to be able to kind of turn that from its current format, where it's got a lot of wear and tear and stuff now. It's been a very popular line, actually, to kind of revamp that trail and make it almost bring it into the kind of like the 21st century. So make it kind of like a double black kind of trail and kind of make it a real feature trail for the centre. So that's certainly where I see the kind of the Forest and Dean Trail Volunteers are putting their efforts now moving forward, is not just more trails, because then you've got to maintain more trails, etc. as well, and is actually kind of modifying and keeping the existing trail network up to a really good standard, and then adapting that and being able to, like they've just done with the Endo Trail, they put some fantastic new corners into that, revamped the GBU jumps, made them bigger and more challenging. So it's kind of like adaptation and evolution that we'll see over the next kind of 4 to 5 years here as well.
It's funny you talk about the evolution, because the things that you see people doing on bikes now, I mean, I guess part of it is the capability of bikes has increased, but then also the average person goes and sends a 20-foot jump now and doesn't think twice about it. Where I'd say the average person, but
I was going to say, who are you riding with?
Yeah, not the average person, but like far more people are inclined to ride that sort of stuff. Whereas like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, nobody was really touching that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, though, is you think that the kids are coming into the sport perhaps at a young age. They're actually then being exposed to these. They've got this fantastic environment. If we talk here at the Forest of Dean, one of the things with the little fodders is you bring them into this great off-road safe environment, but then when you see the progression of these kids, it's unbelievable. And that's what really kind of brings the smile onto your face. Is like you see these kids come through, and obviously everyone knows Charlie Hatton was from the Forest of Dean. Sure. He started building his own trails, and he's now world champion. And then we've got riders like Will Haynes is coming through, who's competing at Junior World Cup level. Billy Pugh, again, a local rider who's really kind of he's riding for YT now. Kind of is sending massive jumps. That's what they're bringing to the party, is that becomes normal. They've kind of learned and kind of evolved and had opportunities that perhaps 20 years ago we didn't have as kids, because we didn't have this trail network out there, and we didn't have that progression. We were kicking some dirt together or building some blooming boxes on the street to be able to build a jump, whereas now you've got these great well-built features to be able to go and ride, and that really does kind of build a progression, particularly if you're learning at a young age. We all know, you learn at a young age, you learn a lot quicker. You build these neural pathways that allow you to be able to become second nature, and you don't think about the size of the jump because you've been hitting them for all your life. Whereas for us older riders, we still look at it and go, wow, that's big. It's like when the vision line was at revs, and you kind of look at it and you're like, no, that's a little bit too far for me. It's a little bit too big for me. Whereas perhaps if I was a young rider coming up and I'd progressively built up to that, you might have taken a different viewpoint on it.
only to have been born about 10 or 15 years later, right?
Yeah, exactly that, or a little bit more for some of us.
Well, no, it's. I don't know if there's anything else that we've not covered already. I mean, have we covered most bases?
I think we have. I think it's, said for us, it's just like, I just see it as a super exciting time for the industry. I think the way that kind of technology is that kind of advanced is just making it more accessible. Yes, that's got challenges, both in terms of the use of the trails, but also, they said, we touched on that education element of it. They are kind of key issues. I think the industry as a whole have to tackle. But actually, it's a positive, really exciting time. Anything that gets more people on, more bikes, enjoying themselves, it's got to be a good thing. And actually, yeah, he said, we're just super lucky here, having such a great trail network. The Dean Trail volunteers working super hard. Forestry England have been super supportive, and hopefully that long may that continue.
Well, it's an amazing facility you've got here, and it's doing a great service to anybody who lives in the area or people like myself who have travelled here. And it's a great reason to come and visit this part of the world. So if anything, I just want to say thank you on behalf of all the other riders that do come here.
Hey, so they said it's we only do our small part, but it's great when you get that kind of feedback and you see people really enjoying it. A lot of the things is like, if you work in this industry, you're not going to be kind of shooting the lights out and earning millions. That's not what you do it. You do it because you're passionate about mountain bikes and you're passionate about cycling, and you want to see people out there having fun on it. And we're lucky enough to be able to make a living off the back of that. And we always feel kind of super blessed that we do have that opportunity.
Well, Gareth, I think the future is bright, and I'm sure we'll be seeing a very full car park this summer. But,
Let's hope so. Cheers, Ben.
Thanks.